Hey guys, I actually got a couple of comments on a power supply efficiency video today asking for kind of a follow-up on a few of the mining motherboards that I've made videos on in the past. So I'm going to go over what I have in my farm, what's been good to me, what's been not so good to me, and then also I'll grab some links for these parts that are on really good closeout sales right now. So as you guys know, I am a GPU residential miner, and I've bought quite a few pieces of hardware over the last 2.5 years for this addiction. So I started off with cards in PCs, then I moved to frames with gaming PC motherboards. Some of them had these little 1 to 4 PCIe splitters, which I'm sure you've used before. And then I moved to 6 GPU mining motherboards, then 8 GPU with the riserless. Then I got some 12 GPU boards. Keep in mind, this was all just cost prohibitive at the time because these boards, even an 8 GPU was, you're doing well if you're paying less than 150 bucks. So I'm going to start off with one of the newer ones. I made a video on this, and at the time they were about 100 bucks. Now you can get them for a little bit less than what I'm showing here, especially if you go on AliExpress. But on Amazon, the B75 stuff, I don't think I would actually recommend you buy necessarily unless you can get it really cheap. Upside to this is it always comes with the CPU, so you'll be able to mine just fine. All of the B75 stuff I've seen does have the ability to power it with just the two 6-pin PCIe, so server power supply, nothing else, no ATX if you want, but also comes with 24-pin ATX with an 8-pin EPS. These boards work great. I have a couple still in service for my higher power GPU rigs, so really nothing against them. The problems I start having are when you get to the 12 GPU variant. I have to shut the integrated graphics off on the CPU on these to get them to register 12 cards reliably. I have two of these in circulation. One's on 12 3060s, which I will drag over right here. It's actually on this rig right here, which of course it's cut off at the bottom. But yeah, this is on, hold on. Oh, it's a Twitch issue. Or OBS, I mean, not Twitch. So you can see at the bottom there it says B75. This has been a really good rig. With the exception of when I first installed it, I left the iGPU on in the processor, and I ran into an occasional dropout of card number 10. It would just switch over to malfunction, stop mining, it would reboot, everything would be fine, but this was happening every couple of days. And it got to the point where I was sick of dealing with it, so I bought a V250 board for it, but as a Hail Mary, before rebuilding it, I decided to disable the iGPU because, and we'll get to this on a later board, the main issue I was having was actually down to a DMI resource shortage. So this has been rock solid. So I do think that this board set's okay. I wouldn't pay more than probably 50 bucks for one of these with a CPU right now, because you still have to source DDR3 RAM, which is cheap, but takes a bit to find. These do not work with ECC memory. The CPUs support it, but the boards don't. So fair warning, you have to use regular desktop memory. 4 gigs is usually okay for Linux, but I'd still recommend 8. So these are okay. I like this style of motherboard. You can still power it with just a server power supply if you want. But all the B75 hardware is a little less power efficient. So these draw about 35 watts idle. And the B250 stuff's about 27 watts idle, so it's not nothing. Moving on, this is one I actually just picked up. So during the last couple of years, these boards were trading hands for more than what you see right here, $599, which is ridiculous. You can pick these up with CPUs in them for 60 bucks right now, and I picked two up just as a trial. I actually have a friend with one locally, and it's a 19 GPU board, but it only supports 19 if you have mining specific cards, as I understand. It's like CMPs, P series. But if I can get 2 or 3 more GPUs out of each one of these, there is still a savings in overhead. So I'll get back to you on this. B250 Mining Expert, it's a very notorious motherboard, but Again, I don't actually have first-hand experience with it yet, so I bought one to test for you guys. Boards I do have experience with. This is the first 12 GPU B70 or B250 board I bought. Paid 120 bucks probably shipped for it, maybe less, depending on when I got it, plus a CPU, plus runs on DDR4, but still have to pay for RAM. Things I do like about this board, it actually has some utility after mining. It has a full-size PCIe X16 slot, so you can run a card on this, build a gaming PC with your i3 or i5, or even your i7 if you've got really nice mining rigs. However, that's also a downside for mining because you have to use those little blades that come with your riser, and if you bump them, potentially you lose contact on your GPU. So the only other downside on this, no HDMI, and I did not get this to run with 12 GPUs without disabling the integrated graphics, period. The by 16 slot just wouldn't register reliably in other cards. So board works great. I still have this on, what rig is that? I think that's Bar DNA 1. So this rig right here is running the BTC B250 OEM. Like I said, I did a video on this one if you want to go back. I did a fairly in-depth look, but this has been solid. This is on a timer, comes up every day, no problem, rock solid. So if you can pick this board up for, and I'll post a link to this right now, they're in closeout for $37.36, and you can see I've actually bought these before. I'm going to pick up at least one more of these, just to speculate. I still think GPU mining is going to come back someday, and that's not a lot of money. So highly recommend these, but again, with that caveat, these. So this is the most reliable mining motherboard I have ever used, and these are $34.97 right now. So even if you've got like a regular desktop motherboard, especially if it's a 6th or 7th gen Skylake Intel already, just go get one or two of these because you're going to save power overhead. Out of the box, they boot up headless, no problem. They have auto power on enabled in the BIOS, so you don't have to do anything. I would still go in and disable the iGPU, but I've got, let me show you another rig with one of those. I think, sloppy seconds. Yeah, this is running one of those boards. So it comes up the same here as the other B250 board, same chipset and everything, but this thing's rock solid. The uptime is only due to this Hynix card right here. The memory overclocking is a little different, but the board itself is rock solid. So these, I'll drop a link to this as well. I cannot recommend this board enough. The only real downside is when it's obsolete for mining, you got to throw it away essentially because there's no PCI slots on it at all. So you can't run anything outside of the integrated graphics, which I mean, still great for an email PC if you want to build one for somebody with one of those Pentiums, especially if it's a 2-core 4-thread 4560, but potentially causing more of an e-waste problem. They're already built, so whatever, but great board. Does have HDMI, which is really nice. And these also have a 4-pin EPS on the CPU, which is weird. All the B75 stuff has higher power draw, I guess. But yeah, like I said, DDR4 RAM, and they're just rock solid. So moving on to frames, I actually bought a few aluminum frames you probably saw recently, and I like those a lot. I would recommend them, but it's hard to find them for as cheap as I found them for. This, I did a 3070 Ti by 8 build. That's on the channel. Kind of a pain to assemble, but this frame is really good. And if you're looking to expand or consolidate, say you have 2 6 GPU rigs and you just bought one of these motherboards, I had really good luck with this, so I'll drop a link for that as well if you'd like. But that's currently, in my opinion, the best deal on a frame new from Amazon, but look on your local marketplace. You might have really good luck with getting cheaper frames from a miner going out of business or just, scrapping their farm. As far as processors, eBay, like bar none. You can pick up G4400s. These are actually cheaper than the Celeron G3900s or G3930s. I keep looking, and like the 4400s are always the cheapest. The only caveat would be is if you want a little more oomph or you want better staying power for the CPUs, if you intend to build budget PCs with the hardware after you're done. Like say, for instance, if you're going with this motherboard versus this one, I would pick up the 4560, which is 2 cores, but it's 4 threads, which is much less obsolete these days. The cores are still pretty good in these, but 2 cores is just not enough for anything except mining, in my opinion. So 4400 though, I mean, you can see this is advertised, and he's got 3 available. They're $875 each. So you get one of those $35 motherboards, you get a $9 CPU, and like any Intel cooler pretty much will fit on there. So that's a really, really low barrier to entry for a nice, reliable setup. As far as GPUs, still kind of hit or miss. You're much better off, at least in my area, with Marketplace and just throwing out offers. But there are a couple of other places, and I don't have affiliate deals with either of these, but jawa.gg. I personally use this. I bought and sold cards with fantastic luck on here. Everyone's been really nice, but the deals are pretty solid, frankly. You get some people that are just crazy, but I regularly see pretty good prices on here. And then the other one is Nerd Gears. I did a Black Friday video on this place, and they always have, like, if you want to buy in bulk, there's no tax, there's no shipping. So honestly, that's not a bad way to go. You can get a 590 for 85 shipped, 1660 Ti's for 120 shipped, 5700 XTs for 149. They do also have 3080s for 500, but unfortunately I can't see them right now. So those are 2 places to check out if your local market's not very good. And I'm assuming that you're in the United States. Sorry, I don't know anything about the international markets, but frankly, if you wanted to set up a pretty decent little mining rig, you could grab, especially if you have cheap electric, you could grab like 12, 60, or 5700 XTs, throw them on there, or even if you have genuinely cheap electrical, you can go with 590s or 580s. Still great performers, just not efficient anymore by modern GPU standards. So something to potentially consider. Yeah, that's kind of my roundup. The hardware that I haven't had great luck with is just getting more than 6 GPUs to run on like a desktop gaming motherboard. I want to say they were like B450 Max. I probably have them in here still. No, I don't, I guess, but B450 Pro 4, that's what it was. That's what I did my 1070 Ti build with, and I have 7 3070 Ti's running on that, no problem, but they're running through a riser card on the main slot, and the other slots basically don't work, so it is maxed out with 7. I can't push hard enough on a mining-specific motherboard if you have an open-air frame and you don't have one right now, especially with the deals like that. And a lot of people are using their old gaming PC motherboards, which in a lot of cases are 6th or 7th gen Intel CPUs anyway. So just look, because you might be able to save your RAM and your processor, and then move it back to a gaming-focused build when you're done. But frames, man, if you have a homemade frame or a 6-card frame, your cards are going to breathe way better with something like this. They've got spots for fans. Power supplies I haven't touched on too much. I really like the EVGA 1200 P2s and the 1600, or actually 1200 T2s and the 1600 P2s. If you can swing it, buy the platinum rated ones, so the P series power supplies. If you can't, the Ts are still great. Gold, if you have a low power rig, is still passable. I've got a couple systems on gold power supplies. But server power supplies, worth looking into. I will say, be a little careful, because you'll see HP server power supplies all over the place, and people assume if it says DPS 1200 and it's got the green label, it's platinum, but the vast majority of these are 80 plus silver, and that's like 35 or 40 watts more just in inefficiency. So always pay attention. Right, of course I can't zoom in on this anymore. There is a number on the model number, and if it ends in 11, it's silver. If it ends in 19, it's platinum. So just be very vigilant of that. This is a silver one right here. Yeah, like I said, just be careful. I've made that mistake buying used ones, but breakout boards are really, really cheap. Yeah, something like this. I would aim for one that's got at least 18 gauge cables. This one's actually 16. That's really impressive. Even Octominers run 18 gauge cable. So for medium to low power GPUs, picking up as your secondary anyway, because On these right here where my mouse is, that's actually a floppy drive power connector, so you can hook up your cheapo ATX power supply that's powering your motherboard and maybe a card into your secondary, and then you can run all of your other cards off of this on a schedule, and you never have to worry about hitting a power button on the server power supply breakout board. If you run a server power supply over 40% of its load potential, it will start to get a little noisy, but they're not terrible until you get above 800 or 900 watts on a 1200. So keep that in mind. If you're noise conscious, ATX power supplies are still definitely better, but something like this is a good option, and server power supplies are just dirt cheap right now too, because all the miners are kind of just closing up shop. But anyway, yeah, I would, like I said, probably avoid the B75 unless you can get the 12 GPU version with a CPU and ideally a cooler too, less than 50 shipped, which you can find on AliExpress. You can get these down to like 45 shipped. But yeah, I've got, where is it? Bardian A2. This one is a B75 12 GPU, and this one occasionally, so these are scheduled. Once they're running, this is rock solid, but when it boots cold, occasionally the last 6800 here will not show up. So I have to program another schedule that just reboots the rig 5 minutes in, and then it's fine. Luckily, I've got, all Navi 21 at the end here, so if one card drops off, all the OCs are the same, so the rig won't crash based on that. So if I'm out of town, it's not a big deal. One of the cars is just sitting there idling. But yeah, it's worth noting that. If you do still have an old AM4 motherboard and you're on 6 cards and you CPU mine with your Zen chip, maybe it's not worth considering doing a mining board upgrade, but there's always a chase for efficiency. There's always chase for just mining hardware addiction. Cheap mining cases. This is a mining case I got for $200 on coupon. Comes with 820 mil fans. Comes with a board, RAM, SSD, 2,000 watt power supply, and adjustable fan curve. So if you have hot cards, these are a great option, especially if you leave them in like a garage or something like that. If you have 3080s, 3070 Ti's, 3090s, these will push a lot of air. You can keep the memory temperatures under control, even if you have a really hot ambient temperature. My plan, these are obviously not hot cards. My plan for the summer, though, is run 6700 XT reference cards, which have pretty hot memory, just due to the design of the cooler. And then all of my GDDR6X cards will be in server cases, too. But I also have a couple of Octominers now. So the X8 Ultra Plus, I did a video on this with the 3070 Ti's. Go check that out if you're curious about all the other functions you get in the top bar with like Octominer settings. When they're running, there's a lot more going on here with like environmental sensors and things like that. And then I also have an X12 and then a couple hosted systems as well. So Octominers are great. If you can pick up an X8 for less than like $400 or an X12 for less than 500, it's a pretty good pickup, I think. But the X8s run a little bit older hardware. You can see down here it says B85 Ultra, so that's Haswell. It's definitely newer than the B75. I'm going to butcher the name if I try to think of it, but it's like 2nd gen or 3rd gen Intel Core on those, and this is 4th gen. So these are better, but really the B250 stuff and the X12s all run Skylake, and that is a much better architecture, and there's really cheap T SKU processors too, which I guess I should cover real quick. G4560T. These are really cheap, and these are 35 watt TDP processors instead of 65. So if you're going to spend $10 anyway, here's one for 10 shipped. Honestly, if it's $8 for a 4400 or 10 for this, I would really suggest you get one of these, because you will save a couple watts, and it's a much faster CPU. So even though it's for a mining build, again, it's just a better CPU. So anyway, that's kind of what I currently am working through. I've got 150, 160 GPUs, so I have kind of some idea of what I like and don't like at this point. I'm done with desktop gaming motherboards. I'm done with gold ATX power supplies. I'm done with low wattage power supplies. I'm done with crappy frames. Now that all this hardware is cheap, I'm just like grooming everything. I guess I should touch on PCIe risers. I buy just whatever. I do these days kind of look for the 6 or the 8 capacitor, but I mean, you can get, and this is even a lot of money for 6 of them right now. If you go on Nerd Gears, occasionally they'll have untested mismatch risers. Those are great too. They're usually brand new, but This is a 4 cap. It's probably still fine. I would probably push you towards a 6 or an 8 capacitor. These little black things sitting on the side of the riser here. Always use the 6-pin to power them. Never use Molex, never use SATA. There are some exceptions, but it's just easier to never ever use them. Splitters, make sure you're getting 16-gauge splitters. But I'm guessing you already have a rig. If you're watching this, so you know all that already. But yeah, that's the hardware that I've had good and bad luck with, as well as like current recommendations. So like I said, some of these parts are just really cheap right now. If I find a good deal on one of these enclosed 8 GPU mining rig frames with like the board and the PSU, I'll drop that as well. But a lot of times right now, that's been a coupon code that you have to apply at the end too. So that's hit or miss, but I will drop links to these boards again with these sellers. The Amazon stuff's affiliate links, so I do get a kickback. eBay stuff is not. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. If you guys have any other questions, I'm sure you will leave them in the comments. But thanks for watching, and let me know if this was at all helpful or informative. If so, I can do it again. Peace.